prankster, wander from room to room, closing them.
I blame him. He walked up pretty quick. He's like, it's this.
So I want to write a function called isFloat that returns a true if it is no. That returns the float value if it is a float, or returns none if it isn't. I still want that return none to work. So let's change the name from isFloat because it's actually going to try to convert it. Make float, that sounds good. And it's going to pass in a string. Now there's more than one way to do this. There's a really easy way, and then there's a hard way. And we're masochists, so we're going to do it the hard way. What would be the easy way? We could use try and accept, and if it caught an error, we just return none, you know? Otherwise, we return the result. So def make float. Let's do it the easy way just for comparisons. Try f is equal to float s, return f. And then accept, if we get an error, we're going to return the word none with a capital. There we go, like that. That's by far the easiest way to implement it. If we did not know about try and accepts, we could try a somewhat bulkier solution. How could we check to see if s was a floating point number?
Look for a decimal.
Yeah, make sure it has one and only one decimal, and that everything that's not a decimal is a digit, other than minus signs. Phooey. Do minus signs even work for is digit? Let's find out. S is equal to -1. S dot is digit. False. You know what? It's almost not worth the trouble of doing this. But we already defined. We already set off on this little march.
We're running down the rabbit trail full speed.
Yeah. So I'm going to call this one make float 2. And I guess our rules would need to be can start with a minus or a plus, but only one. Can have a period, but only one. The rest must be digits. I'm thinking a loop like our password loop might be the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
I was thinking of weird things like find the position of the period, delete it from the string, and then check to see if the whole thing was digits with this digit, but
That's just insane, though. I mean, when you can just use the float value.
yeah. So the first character is a special case. If s dot 0 okay, this is going to be weird, but what are our acceptable characters for the first character?
A negative sign? Or a positive sign?
OK is equal to a negative, a positive,
And a space?
and nah, let's not even allow spaces. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0.
Oh, okay, that's what you're saying.
So what we're going to do is if OK dot find that first character, if it finds that the first character is any one of those, then everything's great. We can continue. Let's change that to equals false, and then we will return a none. in that case.
0?
Now we ought to have a period counter. Dots is equal to 0. And we can do our usual loop. But I'd like to skip that first character. We've already validated that first character. So I think I'm going to use a range statement. For x in range, 1, and then the length of s. We're going to skip the first character, and then we're going to keep going. By the way, this check isn't going to be totally good because it would allow a negative or a positive without any digits after that to go through. But this would be a lot easier if we didn't handle the negative and the positive sign.
Well, couldn't you just do another OK2, find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 0, period?
Right. I could do that. But it's still not going to handle the case of a negative sign followed by no other data.
Right, but if you did OK2, OK find S0 equals false, and do an OK period 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, kind of like this, and then you put S brackets 1. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let's go running with it this way, the way that I have it in my brain, and then we'll come back and revisit it. So if S sub 1 dot, or just equals a period, then we need to increment the number of dots. Dots plus equals 1. If it's not that, we need to do an elif S bracket 1 dot is digit. Then great. I don't even know what to do here. Yippee! Else, and I forgot my colon there. Else we've hit a bad situation. We've hit something that's not a valid float. This really is a fool's errand when doing it by throwing it into a float and just catching the exception was so easy. All right, after we've run through the string, I am so sorry, that's not S sub 1, that's S sub x. Both of those are S sub x. Had to change that line, and we had to change that line. So if we get through here and dots is greater than 1, then we found something with 2 dots. And we want to return none. Not greater than 2, greater than 1. Lastly, if all that's good, we may as well try to put it in a float and pass it back. F is equal to float S. And I guess my snarky comment is, what if that fails? We better put a try on it. Well, that's what we did the first time. And then return F. Boy howdy, that's ugly compared to what it was, and it's still broken. But let's play with it. Let's go down here and just try a few things. Print, the name of our function was makeFloat2. Let's just try it out a few times. MakeFloat2, let's pass in a 1. And I'm going to copy and paste that and pass in 1.0. I'm going to pass in 0.1. And then a plus whatever, plus 1. Now let's pass in some things that are designed to break it. like something with 2 periods. This will break it. And that would break it. And let's add a print statement in our function just so that we can see what it was trying to print. So the very first thing after your def make float 2, make it say print s. So I'm going to scroll back up here, and this is going to be print s. All right, going to call it make float. I have garbage up here that's causing it to break. Right after the def make float 2, we put print s just so that we can see what s is when we try to print it out.
Yeah, that didn't be elif through an error.
It does not like that. Okay, fine. Up here next to dots, put digits equals 0 as well, just like our password calculator. So add this, and then where it says yippee, add this, digits plus equals 1. Somewhere I have a false with a lowercase f, needs to be uppercase. What am I doing? If OK.find doesn't return false or true. What does .find return? We just talked about it when we were going over the exam.
The location.
It returns the location if it finds it, or -1 if it doesn't find it. Or just less than 0 would suffice. So change this line as well. We've made several changes at this point. That one needs to be changed. That one needs to be changed. And then right here we added a change. And I'm kind of getting an idea of how we're going to fix this because I know that it's broken. Be thinking about that because there's probably more than one solution. Alrighty. So it ran for a while, and then finally when it got 2 dots, it returned a none. And then when it tried to convert a plus, it said it could not convert a string to float. That's reasonable because there's no digits. This one actually worked. I'm surprised it worked. How did it know? How did it know that that was going to work? Because really it should have only found 1 dot in it, because it started with a dot. No, it didn't. All right. When you get puzzled about what's going wrong, the nasty brute force way of figuring out what's going wrong is to add print statements. So print, I'm tacking on a print right under our OK.find. Did not find a digit or plus minus. That's one of my print statements. It's one of the places where we return none. I guess I could return a different string since we're just printing that out, but then I want to find the next place I return none. Down here. Print, oops, found, comma by s parentheses x. Just because we're curious what it is. And then if dots is greater than 1, we're going to print a message, too many periods. Okay, well that's a problem with the if statement, because something that starts with a period rather than a 0 point should have been valid. So up here, this line should have had a period in it to be correct. But we're going to wind up wiping that entire thing. I'm going to go ahead and add that and prove that it's still wrong. Here it tried to convert dot dot. It thought it was valid, so it went ahead and tried to make that a float. Why did it think it was valid? Because it checked the first character to see if it was a plus or a minus or a period or a digit. And it said, okay, great. And then it went to the next one, and then it started counting dots from there. Does that make sense? So it didn't even get to the next or last check.
So could you just, instead of skipping over the first character just because it's validated, could you take that part out?
Yeah. What we need to do, exactly, is take all this stuff out. This OK is equal, if OK.find is equal. Get rid of all of that. Make this start from range 0 to length, because we're not going to skip the first character anymore. We're going to add a few else-ifs. So here, elif s sub x is equal to a plus, or s sub x is equal to a minus, colon. That means we found a plus or a minus sign, which is okay if x is still equal to 0. So if x is greater than 0 at that point, return none. Print. Bad place for a plus minus. Okay, we're almost there. And I don't know how lost I've gotten y'all by scrolling up and down.
No, it actually worked with this.
The only thing we need to do is to make sure we have some digits here. So where we have if dots is greater than 1, print too many periods. If digits is equal to 0, return none. This is down here at the bottom. Let's print a message though. Print no digits. And you know what? I am sure that there's an easier way to do this than what I just did. I mean, well, besides that first one. All right, that ran without generating any errors. So that is a working function, however, it's horrible. In computer science, there's the idea of a finite state automata. And the idea of a finite state automata is you can define and we're not going to do this, and we're going to just mention it briefly. What you can do is have kind of a start state, and then you can have an arrow going here that says if the first thing is a plus or a minus, go to the next state. If it's not a plus or a minus, if it's a 0 through a 9, go to the next state. Then as long as it's still a 0 through a 9, okay, 0 through a 9 or a period. Keep coming back to state 1. And then if you ever hit the end of the string, then it's a good string. So you have two states. And now I've kind of forgotten where it needs to go if it fails any of these states.
Go back to 0, right?
Well, if we were trying to, endlessly cycle through a string of digits, otherwise we'd want it to resolve to a bad at some point. So we need some default state going up, and my brain's not working on how to do that. But there are programmatic ways, algorithmic ways, where you use... Oh, my brain totally froze. What is it called if you use expressions like asterisk and whatever in order to indicate what is good data and what isn't? Not
Ask that question one more time.
well, I didn't even ask it right. Just a second, I'll find out. Called something expressions, and I cannot believe that my brain's forgot it. I barely got out of a 4-day trial today. I was on jury duty, and you know, they have the 30 jurors up there, and they ask all of us questions, and I guess I looked too shifty or something because they kicked me out, but I didn't mind.
Oh, that's a crying shame.
Yeah, I was disappointed. No, it wasn't. I would have been honored to do my duty, but still.
Has no string objects.
Regular expressions. That's what they're called, regular expressions.
Oh, I see.
A regular expression is a way to specify what is good data for text matching. It's like, you know how if you do a DOS window, a command prompt, and you do dir s star dot star, and that's going to find everything that starts with an S and that has a dot in it. Well, in this case, it's two directories. That's the idea of regular expressions. You can build regular expressions and then have something that evaluates to see if a string matches that regular expression. That's a way more algorithmic way of doing it, and I don't know how to do it in Python, but it would be the algorithmically correct way of doing it. However, the original kludge that we had of doing it just by casting it into a float, not casting, that's a term for another language, by converting it into a float and catching the error, that's a totally valid way of doing it. I just wanted to play a little bit again with the idea of using isDigit, checking for values, keeping counters to see whether your data is valid or not. Because you may have data that you can't just convert to a float. Like what if you're trying to validate that something is a good phone number? It's going to have maybe parentheses around the first 3 digits, but maybe not. And then after the first 3 digits, if there weren't parentheses, there'll probably be a dash, followed by 3 more digits, followed by a dash, and that's if it's an American phone number, and not anything stranger than that. So we may come back to that at a later point. When we were talking about lists, so far we haven't used slices yet in this semester. Sort of. If you do this, string is equal to hello, and then you print out S sub 0. That prints out H. But what if you wanted the first three characters? In other languages, there's the idea of a substring. You call a substring function, and it'll return a substring of it. But in Python, you do this. Print S0:3. And that would print the first three characters. Again, that second number stands for up to but not including. So it would print character 0, it would print character 1, it would print character 2. This is called slicing. Let's go to the Python shell and play with it. So run Python shell, make a string, S is equal to row state, whatever. And then let's just get some slices out of it. Why did I do a capital S? I'm going to do, well anyways, S parentheses 0 predictably will be R. S0:1 is also going to be R because it goes up to but not including that position. S0:2 blows up because I typed the lowercase s. There we go. RO. Because it went up to but not including that position. A kind of cheaty way of remembering it in your head is just take the difference of these two, and that'll be the length. The difference between 1 and 0 is 1. So starting at position 0 and going 1 is how many it's going to print out. So if I do this, S3:5, how many characters long is that going to be?
None, because it's a lowercase s.
You're so right. Okay, how many characters is that going to be?
3.
Just take the difference between them. It's going to be of length 2. And it starts at index value 3. Where's index value 3 in this? Well, that's a 0. That's a 1. That's a 2. That's a 3. So it's going to be those two things. So that's how my brain thinks of it. Take the difference between these two, that gives you the length, and that gives you the starting position. Or you can just look at it and go, I'm going to go up to but not including 5. So that's position 3, and I'm going to keep going. That's 4, but I'm not going to include 5, so it's E space. Does that make sense? I heard some ums over here like you were initially thinking it was weird, which it sort of is. This is a Python syntax that I haven't seen in other languages. I like it. The same thing works with lists as well as strings. So this is called slicing. Slicing is when you use a number followed by a colon followed by another number. There's a couple little hacks to it you can do. You can leave off the first number, in which case it defaults to 0. I don't know why that's a big deal. You could just type 0. It's not like you're saving a whole one character by doing that. But if I do this, S:3, it's going to start at 0 and go up to but not including 3. So by default, if you leave off the first number, it assumes 0. Similarly, if you start with a comma, start with a number and then put a comma but no last number, it goes to the end of the string. So that should start at character 3, 0, 1, 2. So it'll be E followed by the rest of the string, like that.
Can you do blocks? Like 0:2, 5,
Well, you could do this. I want 0:2 plus 5 to 7. That would take two strings and add them, concatenate them, to use our
Right.
fancy word. So if you wanted a function that would take something out of a string, you could use .find. Let's say we hate spaces. S.find, that space, It's going to return a 4. So we could do S0:4 plus 5 colon, or 4 plus 1, you know, to the end, like that. And that should give us row state without the space. Or it blows up. I forgot the S in front of that part. S
Colon.
0, yeah, I could leave off the 0, colon 4, end of brace, plus S 5 colon, close brace.
Or you can strip.
If you wanted a function that would remove all of the spaces from it, frankly, I think there is such a thing. But otherwise, you could write a loop that kept running. And every time it found a space, it would do this trick to remove the space. And then when it stopped finding the space, we would be done. So that would look something like this. Let's go back to here because that's a little bit more of a program. Let's declare a new string.
Do we want to
Row, space, space, day,
comment out
space.
our ones above it?
I don't think it hurts. Now I need some variable name to hold the index value of the space. I guess I'm just going to use the word space. Space is equal to s.find. Please find a space. And while space is greater than or equal to 0, leave off the parentheses. S equals S colon space, or if we like seeing the 0 there, that's okay, 0 colon space, plus S space plus 1 colon to the end. And then we better find that space again. Space is equal to, because we just removed it, find. And I forgot to print it after all that. Add a print. Print S at the end of it. Okay, printed row state college, skipping all my spaces. I am curious if it'll work if the space is the first character. Yeah, it did. Neat. If for some reason it blew up, you could call the strip function. That'd be a cheap way of fixing it.
That's what I was just kind of thinking.
But there's really nothing wrong with cheap ways of fixing things, actually, as long as it makes sense. You know, stripping is a common enough solution to dealing with spaces on the beginning or end of strings that I wouldn't feel guilty about calling, you know, s.strip. Okay. Is there another method that will do the same thing, a remove all? Let's find out. Because honestly, I don't remember. Python, remove all from string. How to delete all instances of a string in Python. There we go. Dot replace. Here's what we could have done. Make a string with spaces again. Wow. Spaces. And then we could just do s.replace every space you find with nothing. And I think we're actually going to have to return that value. I think if I print s, it's not going to have done a thing. I think we're going to have to store that. I think I'm going to have to do s is equal to s.replace. So the last line, second to last line, s is equal to s dot replace. There's a term called functional programming, which is considerably beyond what we're learning. But one idea of functional programming is that none of your functions ever actually modify the data. They just return a new version of the data without changing what you passed it. And that would be an example of it. Calling s.replace doesn't change the data, it just returns a new version of it. Just like s.upper doesn't make your string uppercase, but it returns a string that has been uppered. Okay, so there is a dot replace method that takes whatever you specify here and replaces it with that. And it does it through the entire string, not just for the first one. So it's nice to know these things, because writing that certainly is cooler than writing that.
Right. Unless you get paid by the line.
Yeah, unless you get paid by the line of code. But I like for y'all to have these concepts in your brain, just because you're thinking more like a computer scientist. If besides, I mean, you ought to be able to write your own function for calculating the minimum value of a list, as well as calling min and then passing a list to it. Here's the same idea. Finding and removing all the spaces. I'd like for y'all to know that. That's not going to be on an exam, but I want you to look at it and examine what it's doing. We find the index value of whatever our special character is, and we use that. We go up to but not including that character, and then we start at the next character after it. So that skips that character. Something fun that would be fun to do would be to take text in the format, don't type this. Well, I mean, I guess I could, but we're not going to do anything with it. Take some text in the form of HTML tags. And write something that would strip all the tags. The tags are the things that start with the angle braces. So if it's well formatted HTML, for every open brace, there should be a closed brace. And there's lots of HTML tags. Some of them longer than others. If you want to reference an image, it's image source equals something. I forgot to put quotes around it. And like I said, you don't have to be typing this. Image source is equal to whatever, .jpg. That specifies the path to an image. Now that's bad because we're using quotes inside of quotes. So I'm going to cheat and use a single quote outside the end of it. If we were trying to write something that would print only stuff that wasn't in tags, it wouldn't print this at all, because our definition of a tag is everything between the angle braces. Then there are attributes in HTML. And those are things like this. Table width equals 100, that kind of thing. And then there's something that means start a new row, then there's something that means start a new column, and then you could put a word there, and you could close that column, you could close that row, and you could close that table. So if we were writing something that only printed out things that weren't in tags, well, that's a tag. Everything in it is a tag. Then, whoops, there's another tag. Whoops, there's another tag. Okay, I found some non-tag text. I would print the word wow. And then we would ignore the rest of it. This is a tag because it starts with an angle brace, but then it has an attribute tucked in it. Width equals 100 is an attribute of the table tag. Source is an attribute of the image tag. Keep those terms tucked away in your mind, because when we get to JavaScript, the idea of tags and attributes is going to suddenly become dramatically important. How would we write a function that would, if given this string, would print out, this is text, but not print out anything between the angle braces? I'm going to comment the rest of this stuff out. here's what I'm thinking. We could process it character by character, and if we ever hit an open brace, we stop doing anything with those letters until we hit the close brace. We have some kind of flag that indicates whether we are inside a tag or not. So let's see if we can get that to work. DEF strip tags. Let's take a string. Let's declare a variable called tag, or in tag. We are in a tag, but we're going to assume that we're not in a tag until we hit an opening brace. Then for every character in the string, is this going to work? For every CH in S, if CH is an open angle brace, we're going to set in tag equal to true. Elif CH is equal to a close tag, we're going to set in tag equal to false. You see what that's doing? As soon as we find a tag, an angle brace, we're going to set a flag called in tag equal to true. And as long as that flag is true, we're not going to be printing any characters out. All right, lastly, if it's neither one of those, then it's text. It's not an angle brace. And what we do with that text is dependent upon that in tag flag. If in tag, or if not in tag, colon, let's just print that letter out, print CH. That's not going to look good. It's going to rip it, straight down rather than horizontally. So let's tack on the end clause. End equals empty quote, like that. And then after the end of it all, let's just print a character turn, since we were printing all end lines. All right, let's call strip tags. See if we have working code. Strip tags on, by the way, I guess P stands for paragraph. It just means plain text. This is my text / P. What is this code doing if in tag is equal to true? And the answer is nothing, but why? We do this if not in tag business. That means that this printing only happens while the in tag flag is false. Why are we only printing when the in tag flag is false? What switches the in tag flag equal to true?
The open bracket.
Yeah, the open bracket sets that to true. So as soon as that is hit, everything after that is not going to be printed until we finally hit one of those. Maybe. Better run it and find out.
So it doesn't print the P in between the bracket.
Exactly, that's our goal. And it actually worked. I'm impressed.
What did I do?
What we could make it do would be where you pass in a huge chunk of tags and it returns you a list of all the text and the tag that that text was enclosed in. So if there were 2 P's, it would return a list full of 2 text items. And what do I mean by that? What if it had a second piece of text here? Like that. Here we have one tag, one paragraph text, one paragraph of text. Here we have a second paragraph of text. Now we're not going to do this time, but it would be cool if this parsed this text in such a way that it was a list and the list indicated what the tag was, so that you could go through the list and say, I just want to print out all the paragraphs, you know, I want to ignore every other kind of tag. That's considerably beyond what we're doing now. Let's make an inbox for this.